just like home. Now I'll call the land use meeting to order. Thank you all for being here at home, on TV, and here in the audience, and our council members. First order of business on our agenda is the approval of minutes from November 28th. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved to approve.
Second, Karski.
Motion by Councilor Anderson Jr. and second by Councilman Karski to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Our first order of business is our Urban Agricultural Task Force, our Community Garden Ordinance, and Shauna Goldhammer, our Zoning Enforcement Manager, is here to explain what this committee or this task force has done. And Shauna, I'll give it off to you. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. My name is Shauna Goldhammer. I'm your Zoning Enforcement Manager, yours and those folks who are watching on TV. I work for the Planning and Zoning Office, and also was asked by the Land Use Committee, actually, in October, November of 2011, to create and facilitate a task force to study and talk about urban agriculture type land use activities. Primarily how the task force has approached this is divided into two separate categories, that being with keeping of animals and also horticulture and gardening. What you have before you is a community garden ordinance. It is a zoning ordinance amendment. It is scheduled to go to the Planning Commission also this week, if you so see fit to move it forward. What we've done is created a new definition in the zoning ordinance to accommodate community gardening activities as a land use, and then we've allowed that community gardens as a permissive use, permitted by right, in all the zoning districts across the board in the city limits. So with that, I can, that you have the ordinance here, and I've put it up on the screen, and hopefully folks in the room can read that definition, and I'd be happy to answer any questions on how we've proceeded for the task force, how many times we've met, that kind of thing. But this is a result of months and hours of both task force time and staff time.
You have some questions, Councilor Ertenbach.
Yeah, I do actually. I spent a little time putting it into context, because as we see it now and as you see it on SIRE, and I don't because I'm struggling with this right now, but is that it is just an added definition. And then also the land use is allowed in all the zoning districts. Right, exactly, which is amazing. Yes, there is no other land use that is allowed in all the zoning districts. This is the only one that I know of. Well, Councilor Karski has one in the backyard of his office, so, and remember, this is to accommodate those vacant properties where this would be the primary use on, there's nothing else going on these houses. We're not talking about backyard gardens or a garden that a church may be growing food for the poor, because the primary use in that situation would be the church, and the garden is already allowed on a church site. What this does is allow it in places that are vacant properties. Well, if I could, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to commend the group for putting this together the way that you did, because it does really make sense. I mean, I know you spent a lot of time with it, but for me, I'm not seeing negatives to this, so I think it works really well. Okay.
I might, could I ask you, do you have the brochure?
I do.
It comes together a little bit better when you see the brochure that are some, I would say, guidelines that that Shauna will go off of. Yep. For use in I want to say maintaining, or what would be a word you would use? Not maintaining, but
it really has to do with management criteria.
The community gardens, then. Right. If you could explain those to us.
Yes, I sure can. Now, what we've done is, and I'll put that. Okay. Now, picture this as a brochure that's folded. Okay, so this is just kind of a template, new equipment. So don't touch it. You're gonna break it. No.
You're good. You're good. You don't have to do anything, Shauna.
Okay. So You can see here, this is the front and the back of the brochure, and the community, this is how the brochure looks, and then the actual guidelines will be on the inside of the brochure. And we discussed the management things like composting, and these are for the community gardens that are out there outside of the Master Gardener or Parks program, because community gardens that are within parks would be an accessory use to the park. So these are provide guidelines and management criteria for those folks like the Avera campus community garden that provides for management guidelines, including composting, general maintenance and care, rain barrels that they need to be secured and also labeled that the water is not for drinking, storage of plants, a setback, and that means you need to have an edge between the garden and the property line, and also surface plant material to be removed annually by December 1st, so it doesn't create a nuisance. So the task force was really concerned with being educational when it came to community gardens. We didn't want to play catch you if you can kind of thing, but we did want to provide the education and the community expectations when these things are being provided.
Any further questions from the committee?
I have a question.
Yes, Councilor Anderson.
This even either yourself or Dean might be able to ask too. So now, as far as all the study that you've done, this is what you're going to bring forward? You're going to bring these forward in stages, I take it? Like, you know, you're looking at animal usage and everything like that too, but this is the first thing that we're going to bring forward.
This is the first stage. Now, community gardening and urban agriculture gardens are encouraged in the Shape Sioux Falls, which is our 2015. That's what we use to base our land use decisions. The keeping of animals is not included in the comprehensive plan. And also, it is a separate ordinance. The keeping of animals is a separate ordinance. So we're going to take a look at that too, but it won't be a zoning ordinance amendment. It may have some, because zoning touches a lot of things, it may have some tweaking that we need to do, but the primary focus of that keeping of animals will be in Chapter 7 of the Code of Ordinances, animal control kind of things.
Are we also looking at individuals' gardens and developments in there as far as their homes?
No, because that's already allowed and widely accepted. So we were just concerned with community gardening and looked for a way to encourage that type of horticulture to take place in the city limits.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Karski.
Shauna, if we could bring back the pamphlet one more time. I don't know who's controlling that. There we go.
Okay.
The 5-foot setback from all property lines, I thought we had discussed that, and the 5-foot was going to be from the front property line, and we're going to do like a 3-foot on the sides.
This is where we landed. We did have a number of discussion. Should it be 5 feet? Should it be 3 feet? Should it be different? And this is where we landed as far as uniformity. It would be easier to just have one distance from all property lines. So there was a lot of discussion on if we even needed a setback or an edge. And this is where we kind of landed.
Now, does the pamphlet has the force of ordinance behind it because it's defined by the ordinance if passed, correct?
Correct, yep. In zoning, the Director of Planning and Building Services has the authority to interpret and create guidance in the form of interpretive bulletins, and that's the approach that we took. So if it turns out that there's something in the guidelines that needs to be changed, we certainly would bring it back to maybe the Land Use Committee, but it wouldn't have to go through an ordinance revision. The process would not have to, because this is an administrative function to interpret what those guidelines should be.
Okay.
Might I say the process that we've been following has seemed to work very well. People have been very very well structured in their in the process in delivering their help and the comments that they've given us as a task force. We are using the same process with the animals, and we're hoping that it goes just as well that way. We think it will, and so we're going to continue to do that, and hopefully the animals part of this will come out a little bit different. I think it'll be a little more structured with a few more numbers and maybe some more ordinance type things in it than what the community gardens is. But it was a good place for us to start, get our feet wet, know each other a little bit better, and for the people that are very interested in this type of agriculture, shall we say, and this type of planning, that they could find out how we wanted to work and how their input was going to be taken, and they found out that their input was very, very valuable to us and helped us tremendously on this process.
Yeah,
and it will in this part too.
Right. We've had about between 20 and 30 people attend each meeting, and some meetings we don't take public input because we're kind of working through it, and then when we get to a point that we think, okay, here's something, what do you think? Then the public has stepped up to the plate and really been involved in the process. So.
Very much so. Shauna, can you explain the process now that we'll go through after we deal with it now, then what, and then what happens after
right.
that?
Based on your recommendation here, the process to amend the zoning ordinance is that we need to get a recommendation from the Planning Commission. In anticipation that you are ready to move forward with this, I have scheduled it with the Planning Commission for this week. They meet the first Wednesday of the month, and I will be before them on Wednesday night. After that, all the stuff that comes to the City Council in a package will be forwarded to you, all the Planning Commission stuff, I should say, and that would go first reading on May 15th. I get the Tuesday thing in my head here. And then the second reading and final adoption would be 2 weeks later in the first Tuesday in June.
Any further comments or questions?
I would move that we move this forward to the Planning Commission.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Shauna. Okay, our next topic for today is our sign code amendment, and Jeff Schmidt is here from the planning office. Jeff, thank you very much. We're looking forward to it.
The process we've been going through has been working with a study group, and we presented the findings to the study group in a report last July to the Land Use Committee. Since that time, I've been trying to put it together into an ordinance and either doing the entire thing or small sections of the ordinance. At this point, I have the entire document drafted over to Media Services, Mass Media Production. Am I close? Multimedia Support. Thank you. They have a new name. And then that draft will go back out to the study group. Study group will review it, put recommendations together. It will go to Planning Commission, just the same process that Shauna explained before it gets to City Council. Where we're at, I've kind of checked off in my PowerPoint. The study group should work towards completing a report. We did that. The sign code should be consistent with Shape Sioux Falls, as Shauna mentioned also. It's our comprehensive plan. We've done that. It should be predictable and consistent regulations and signs that are appropriately scaled and distributed. That's the one thing we're still struggling with. Are we making sure that we're predictable and consistent? Because there's nothing worse than the public gets out there and says, wait a minute, you're treating them different than us, or I didn't understand it. So we're working through those. Explain the time frames a little bit from where we've been. Our goal statement in 2035 is that signs in Sioux Falls should be appropriately scaled and distributed, neither so small that they fail to communicate, nor so large that the signs dominate the environment. Again, people are in support of that. They understand what that is. Now putting into a law gets a little bit more challenging. This still goes back to Shape Sioux Falls and being consistent with Shape Sioux Falls. We did a visual survey. The public told us what they liked and what they didn't like. We're working through those things to allow master plans. We're permitting off-site campus signs. We're going to have public directional signs. We want to create creative signs, limit commercial signs, and limit the size and duration of temporary signs. And honestly, when it gets down to it, everything's been addressed except for that last one. That is extremely hard for everybody to understand, to be consistent, and be effectively doing it. That's banners, that's window signs, that's flags, that all those different types of things that are temporary in nature are very difficult to enforce and for everybody to be treated fairly. So that's the last little segment that we're kind of struggling with. What signs are, this is the quick analogy that everybody can look at. We look at three things: where the sign can be, how the sign can be, and when the sign can be. We don't care if this says Lewis Drug or Walgreens or Shopko. The signed content is not something that we should be addressing. That's a First Amendment right. We look at where, how, and when signs get addressed. So again, the study group recommendations came forward in the study report that came to you before. We're making sure that we're addressing all these things. We're putting together amendments, definitions. We're making sure that it's predictable and consistent. This is the format that we basically, in March, went to the study group and said, are we fine with this? Of the 10 to 15 people are there, I think everybody's still nodding their head saying, absolutely, this is the format we want. You're going to have listing, the following signs are allowed in the district, and then you have A, you can say building signs, B is freestanding signs, and C is allowed temporary signs. You also have identification signs. Then you'd get to 2, and the signs that are not allowed in the district. Right now, our zoning code for signs isn't set up that way. You may see freestanding signs first, then building signs, or you may see temporary signs, you have to go to a different section. When you pull up the district that you're in, you're going to be able to see what building signs are allowed, freestanding. Every one will be consistent and predictable. So this is what we've really struggled with, is how do you want it to flow? How should it look? And so now we've drafted the ordinance in this format for all the districts and the forms that we have. And we'll be going back out to the study group. What we heard in March is that the study group wanted to see the ordinance. I had chicken scratches and I had edits and I had revisions, but I didn't have it all formatted as you typically like to see it, strike throughs and underlines. That's what's being completed right now. So, questions and comments?
Councilor Urbanbeck.
Thank you, Councilor Ralphin. My specific question, and I may have answered it just in your presentation, was the specific example is the Parade of Homes type signs that are temporary for 2 weekends in a row. It's a very organized, precise project. It's not, random, I'll paint your house kind of sign that's just stuck somewhere. These are signs that are put there by an organized organization here in Sioux Falls. Where do those fit? And I think it's in that temporary signage.
Correct.
And can you talk about that some more?
They are in temporary signs. Currently, we're calling them basically boulevard signs.
Okay.
We brought that to the land use. Kermit's not here right now. Back when Kermit was still on the board and the commission, and it was Bob Litz and I think Jameson and Kermit Staggers. We proposed that, and the issue really comes down to predictable and consistent. We don't look at content, so we can't say the Parade of Homes can have them and J&L Harley can have, but these other people can't. It's signs are allowed in this district, and at that point, the stakeholder group and the public came out and said, we are opposed. You can't allow their signs on my property or someone else's signs to be cluttering up the right-of-way. So at that point, the Land Use Committee did not support it and did not bring it forward. So that's the biggest indication that we are having with temporary signs, is we don't want to look at the content. You either allow the signs or you don't allow the signs. And so from your great description is that's fine that that's an organization, but anybody then can put them up in the boulevard. And the public isn't in support of that.
So it comes down to a time issue. You have to define what temporary means.
Where, when, and how. Correct. So you could, and that's what we kind of said, this is the sign, we brought in a prototypical sign. This is a sign that could be put up, not any bigger than this. And they went, okay. And it would be, 3 days before and 7 days after you had this time frame that they went, okay. And then it really came down to boulevards are public right-of-way, okay? So any sign that we're referencing isn't, the Parade of Homes sign aren't going on their property. They're going on someone else's property. So then the apartment complexes started to say, so someone can put a boulevard sign up in front of my complex saying, rent from this apartment? Yes, they could. They went, whoa, wait a minute. No one's putting a sign on my property. Well, yes, they can. The Parade of Homes signs, realtor signs go on corners. That's not their property. The public got very nervous, and they said, no, either everybody can do it or nobody can do it.
Councilor Anderson, Jr.
Jeff, what's your timeline? When are we going to be able to read this, at least the first draft of an ordinance?
I've asked for the draft be back to me, I think, in the middle of May, beginning of May. So that draft will be done. I'll bring it out to the study group. Again, at this point, the study group likes the consistency. They like the format. We're going to be really struggling with temporary signs. So then it will be a challenge for me to say, do I, as Urban Ag did, bring in sections and say, here's the first section, just dealing with buildings and freestanding signs. We won't talk about temporaries. Or what we've heard in the past is, no, signs have to be look in context. You have to take the whole thing and present it. So I would not bring it forward to you if we're still struggling with temporary signs.
Okay. When you say you have like a task force
Yes.
of citizens looking at this, is this a wide range of citizens, business owners?
Property owners, sign contractors, representatives from sign industries. We advertise it on the website just like any of our other study groups, the agendas, the minutes, the upcoming meetings. So it's very public and open. And 10 to 15 people at a time, and I think I advertise it to like 30 different people. So.
Thank you.
How long, anybody else? Okay, I do have a couple. Give us some kind of timeline on this, Jeff. Do you think it's going to be middle of the summer?
Fall.
Okay.
Yep, I would say probably September. If we could meet May, June, and July and have it confirmed, and again, not everybody's going to be happy. We've had people at the study group stand up, just like you guys do, and say, listen, not everybody's going to win this. You're not going to get, but is this a good product? Is this addressing the issues? Let's bring it forward. We're going to get to that point and just say, you know what, we're going to have to agree to disagree and bring it forward and have Planning Commission, City Council approve it. So if we could maybe meet May, June, and July and go to Planning Commission in August and be in front of City Council in September.
Super, super.
Yep.
I have one other question. It sounds to me like there's an implementation issue here. What are you going to do with all the signs that are out there now? Because I've been in communities that they started with the new places, new signs going up, and they say they can only be 8 feet off the ground or 6 feet off the ground, that kind of thing, 8 feet, whatever. And I kind of like that idea. They look really nice when they're not, 20 feet in the air and that kind of thing. But then what do you do with the signs that are? Yeah, there you go. That
Monument
kind of
signs.
What?
That's monument signs. So we say how. What a how sign.
Okay. What do you do with the ones that are already 20 feet in the air?
They're permitted. Okay, they've gone through the zoning office. They get permits for freestanding signs and wall signs. As they're permitted now, they would be permitted to go forward. If they would say, we're changing out this sign, we need to pull a new permit, at that point they'd have to meet the new standards. Okay, we've even gone that direction with banners. We're getting pretty good support on banners. Currently, the ordinance for banners is that they have to advertise special events, temporary nature. It started to look at content. They could only have them up for a certain time period, and then they were up to 100 square feet, and they had to be on the walls of the building. What we're proposing and getting a good response for is permit that sign. Give us on your banner, tell us what wall it's going up on, what square footage it is, and when you put it up, so that if we get a call, we can pull up that permit and say, it was allowed. And again, we wouldn't dictate the content. If it was grand opening, it was a liquor, whatever they want to change, that content is same on that permit. And so we wouldn't have to go back and enforce it as long as they stayed that same square footage. And again, the time frame issue would go away. So we're getting there on the banners.
Okay. Yes, Dean.
So the way you're talking, if I wanted a banner, I could permit it. And banners, to me, are temporary.
Correct.
Okay. And if I want to replace it with a different banner, I have to get a new permit?
No, as long as you stayed within that permit stance. You basically say it went on this wall, it went up at this time frame, and it was 150 square feet. Put up another 150 square foot sign.
So I can
really, the
keep
enforcement
replacing.
comes back to how it's written today, is that that has to stay in good repair. It can't be frayed and battered and torn and ripped. And so if it, first day, it rips, go get another one, put up a new one. We're not going to require a new banner permit for that.
But there would be a time limit on it.
We're not looking at this point. We're not looking at a time frame because that enforcement is so hard to address. We would just say keep it in good. That's really the issue. The time frame was based upon they got in bad shape. They got faded, and you need to take them down because they were temporary. We'd go out and enforce really how they looked if they became frayed and ripped and torn. But we'd allow them to stay up.
Councilor Anderson, you had another question?
Yeah, Jeff, by addressing this ordinance and looking at the sign part of it again, not the banners, how are we going to, I guess, address the issues that we ran into with the small strip mall on 41st Street that has, I think it's Shopko and the Hobby Lobby? If you remember, they wanted to put up a sign, a digital sign for all the businesses, and I believe there was some land use issues there.
We've talked about campus ID signs, and we're going to be allowing campus ID signs. That specific issue is pretty typical anywhere in Sioux Falls right now. You have a large parcel of ground, 20 acres, 50 acres of ground, and people want to own their land. Now, in the past, the Western Mall owned everything on their property, so then they had the signage on their property. Now, Shields will come in and own theirs, Best Buy will own theirs, and they'll go, and we want a sign out here. Well, it's not their property, so they can't put a sign on someone else's property. That's the issue at Shopko, is Shopko has their sign, they own it. The restaurant had their sign and they owned it, and someone in the back said, we want to put a sign on now it's the 18th Amendment. We want to put a sign on the 18th Amendment's property. And we said, we can't allow that. We still won't allow that in the future. But they could have one with Shopko on their signs.
Okay, thank you.
I have a comment on that. Somehow it doesn't seem, I don't want to say proper, but it doesn't seem right to take a temporary banner and say that this can be a permanent sign. Just change it out.
That's why we're struggling with temporary signs.
Yeah.
That still has to go through land use. It still has to go through planning. We're going to have disagreement. That's where the study group is at right now, is they'd like to do it that way.
Okay,
Again,
just a comment.
right.
Just
I
a comment.
agree.
Well,
Yes.
and the problem we have then is that we can't legislate ugly.
Right.
So that's where I struggle.
Yeah.
Or good taste.
And so then we get back to like boulevards, either allowed or they're not allowed. And so you could say, let's not do banners. Or you go, we could put a time frame on them. We're struggling through those aspects. Temporary signs are a real window signs. You see, some look nicer than others when they paint on their windows, but are those temporary or how long are those up? Temporary signs are a real struggle.
Yeah, we can see that.
Chair?
Yes.
Jeff, are we still with these temporary banners? Are we still at, I think you said earlier, 100 square feet?
We are currently, yes.
Are we going to stay in that area, or are we going to allow different sizes?
We're going to allow different sizes.
Okay.
Okay, what it comes down to is there are some facilities in Sioux Falls that have banners that are larger than 100 square feet. They look fine in context. When you get one up on the pavilion, you put a 100 square foot banner up on the pavilion, you'd go, it's a postage stamp. We have to look at that. I've recently met with like 4 or 5 managers from Avera Hospital. They have one up on Cliff Avenue in the Prairie Center. What is the proper scale? It's not 100 square feet, but it's not 15,000 square feet either. We have to come up with something.
And then if I can continue, then also you stated that you want to continue keeping these banners on the buildings.
Right.
I think we've had a couple issues where construction companies doing remodels want to put it on the side of their semi or something like that they're using as a construction trailer.
Existing ordinance doesn't allow that. Right now they have to be on the buildings or on your freestanding sign, so that's the disconnect there. If the study group gets to the end of the temporary sign section and says they can allow them, we'd present that before you. But we haven't really struggled with that yet.
Thank you.
You want to step down and try to decide how many animals we should have in allowing the, sounds like about the same kind of deal.
Yes, it is. You know, and you go through a study group and you bring it forward to the committee, and that's what staff does. You know, we don't really, we'll enforce what the laws are.
There you go. And we'll get public input, and you'll come up with a number, and and then we'll work from there. And if it doesn't work, we'll bring it back together and
Change it again.
and change it if we have to. That's
Correct.
right. So we thank you for your input. We thank you for your diligence, and we know we'll come up with something that'll be workable. And if it's not completely workable, it'll be changed so that it will be workable. Any other questions for Jeff? Okay. We have some open discussion now. Are there some things from the group on open discussion? Thank you for your time. Our next meeting will be on a Tuesday, I believe. Or are we staying on Mondays? Thought maybe they'd do that to land use. Next, the last Monday or last Tuesday of May, which I believe is very close to the last day of May too, if I looked at my calendar right. But it will be on your calendars. And thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.